Peppa entered a narrow shop filled with dust and old things. On a shelf stood a glass icicle with a tiny Labubu figurine frozen inside it. The label read, "Make a wish. Break it." Peppa bought it and made her wish.
I want George to stop crying.
She shattered the icicle on the floor. At that moment, dead silence fell over the house. Peppa returned home. George sat on the rug, not crying anymore. His eyes turned glassy empty. The next day, Peppa wanted ice cream. By morning, the fridge was packed to capacity, but it was made of worms moving in bright cups. Once, there was too much noise in the house, and Peppa longed for silence. Her parents opened their mouths, but no sound came out. Peppa was frightened. In the corner of the room appeared a Labubu toy. It had grown to ceiling height. Its crimson smile moved as if alive.
Your new wish. I'm listening.
Peppa ran outside, clutching a shard of icicle in her fist, and made her last wish.
Bring everything back as it was.
A huge Labubu appeared before her, its body made of broken glass and shining brightly in fragments. It laughed silently.
You can't cancel trends, but you can lead them.
George stepped out of the shadows. His glassy eyes reflected the moonlight. He raised his hand and pointed at Peppa. His mouth opened wide and a swarm of glass shards burst forth from it, each carrying inside tiny Labubus. They sang in a thin chorus as they merged into Peppa's skin. She tried to shake them off, but they stuck and grew inside her skin. Her skin hardened into transparent glass. Their last scream froze in her throat into a quiet chime like shattering crystal. Peppa and George splashed in a sunny pool when George suddenly froze, pointed trembling finger downward, and started crying as several dark, blurry figures moved smoothly underwater past stairs and through its bottom. The water around them turned icy and viscous like thick syrup. The figures sped up, surrounding George, whose frightened scream abruptly stopped into muffled bubbling sounds. The bubbles turned black as Peppa desperately climbed out onto the edge. Peppa stood trembling as water dripped onto warm tiles below her feet. She looked down at her reflection in wet tile, her face still beneath water, pressed against surface with black eye sockets staring upward, mouth twisted in silent scream. She recoiled and ran to change room. The floor was wet, mirrors fogged up thickly, drops fell from ceiling, creating puddles reflecting dim light. Dark shadows flickered within them. Outside door was covered with shiny black film. Peppa hurriedly wiped mirror to see her reflection calmly standing there, not mimicking movements, but smiling broadly with black holes instead of eyes. Peppa burst into shower stall, slammed door shut, turned tap sharply. The shower head poured thick black liquid that dripped onto her leg, burning coldly through skin. Liquid flowed down, forming a cold tentacle wrapping around her ankle. Behind foggy glass silhouettes reached out with hands pressed against outside surface. Peppa leaned back against cold tiles. The tentacle tightened further, causing numbness to creep upward along her leg. The silhouettes outside began emerging through water reflection. Instead of Peppa's face, a mask with hollow black eye sockets and a grotesque frozen smile stared back at her. Suddenly, tiny black points appeared at corners of Peppa's eyes. They floated toward pupils. One finger twitched involuntarily, a sign of unnatural movement, as monsters surrounded her silently inside, but no sound came from within. Peppa and George were building a castle in the sandbox. The sand beneath their feet trembled. Suddenly, holes appeared in the ground. dark sticky pits. A black tentacle grabbed George's dinosaur. The holes vanished instantly. The sand felt cold, heavy. Round mounds started to rise all around. One of them opened, revealing a black, sandy mouth full of teeth. Peppa grabbed George and they ran toward the house. The mouth growled behind them. Waves of sand rippled under their feet. Evening. The backyard. Shadows were growing longer. From a new hole, George's dinosaur crawled out, covered in shiny black sand, its red eyes glowing. Toy turned its head and looked at Peppa. The dinosaur's teeth had turned black. All the sandy patches in the yard began to stir. Tentacles of black sand stretched out toward the children. The entire yard became a sea of moving black sand. A giant faceless figure emerged, in its mouth, absolute darkness. Peppa and George ran into the house. On the walls, a flickering reflection appeared. Behind Peppa stood 1,000 barely visible sandy hands. Peppa slammed the door shut. George was crying. Black sand tapped against the glass and crept up the walls of the house. Soon it began slipping under the door. Grains of sand fell from the ceiling onto Peppa's shoulder. She ran to the kitchen. The hourglass on the table flipped over, and the sand inside turned black. In the window's reflection, Peppa saw her own face, but her eyes were filled with black sand. The walls began to form a shifting message, written in sand. "You will not leave." Peppa returned to the hallway. A shadow flickered. George was standing there, but without a face and with eyes made of black grains. In the corner of the room, the sand gathered into a tall arch, through which distant laughter could be heard, though no one was laughing. Peppa experienced terrible nightmares every night. She told her mother about them. Then her mother opened an old dusty jewelry box and found an ancient pendant. "This is a magical thing. It protects children from bad dreams and evil creatures," she explained. Receiving the gift, Peppa immediately put it on before going to bed. But that night she was again haunted by a terrifying nightmare. In her dream, she saw George, who had turned into a disgusting monster with bulging eyes, long claws, and sharp teeth. Thick green slime dripped from George's mouth as he slowly approached her, emitting a disgusting hissing sound. In the morning, Peppa told her mother everything, but she remained indifferent, repeating that the pendant would definitely work. The next night, the nightmares grew stronger and more realistic. She found herself in a dark corridor of her house, dimly lit by flickering bulbs. Suddenly, the figure of her father appeared, but he had transformed into a huge pig monster with dark red eyes, a long neck, terrifying claws, and crooked teeth. The creature approached Peppa, growling loudly. Waking up in the middle of the night, Peppa discovered she was alone in her bedroom. Her father was gone. When Peppa tried to take off the jewelry, it suddenly came to life and began stretching out, transforming into a chain of countless eyes, mouths, and limbs trying to grab her with their tentacles. Terrified, Peppa screamed and ran into another room. There, she encountered George. His body had stretched into a shapeless mass covered with numerous toothed mouths and claws. Peppa shouted and ran into the living room. But there she was, met by George and her father. Peppa ran back to her room, trying to hide from them. Suddenly, the walls trembled. Furniture started moving on its own, and a voice from nowhere whispered, "The pendant didn't protect you because I created it. I made it to lure you into a trap of eternal nightmares." Horrified, Peppa saw her mother enter the room, but she was now covered with many eyes, hands, and legs, with a frightening, distorted grimace on her face. Peppa was about to run away when the door slammed shut. The lights went out. A heartbreaking scream escaped Peppa's lips as the monster's mocking laughter echoed around